Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michele Farquhar. I'm the office managing partner here at Hogan Lovells, DC office, with over 1,000 people here that work here, but they're unfortunately not all here now. But thank you for joining us and welcome to the firm as well as to the panel. Let me first introduce the panelists. We're joined by Carrie Bennet, General Counsel of the Rural Wireless Association, Michael Essington, Senior Manager of Public Policy for DISH, Tim Meyer, Managing Partner of Go Long Wireless Group, and Joel Thayer, President of the Digital Progress Institute. So let me start by setting the stage and giving a brief overview, and I'll help you out a little bit with the acronyms for those of you who may not know some of these at 12 gigahertz. So the 12 gigahertz band comprises the 500 megahertz located between 12.2 and 12.7 gigahertz, which is often considered the mid-band spectrum that balances the attributes of capacity as well as coverage. 3 services are co-primary in this band, including direct broadcast satellite, which I'll refer to as DBS, non-geostationary satellite orbit fixed satellite service, which I'll refer to as fixed satellite, and the terrestrial service known as the multi-channel video distribution and data service, which I'll refer to as MVDDS. There are 2 DBS incumbents, of which DISH is the largest, and DISH also has the majority of the MVDDS licenses, which were auctioned by the FCC back in 2004 and 2005. Other major MVDDS licensees include RS Access and Go Long Wireless. We're joined here by Tim from Go Long Wireless. And the fixed wireless licensees have been slowly deploying their satellite constellations at 12 gigahertz, and they're also using some of the nearby gigahertz spectrum for that. So back in early 2021, the commission opened a rulemaking proceeding to explore whether it should, and I'll quote, add a new or expanded terrestrial mobile allocation in the 12 gigahertz band without causing harmful interference to incumbent licensees. So that proceeding has attracted a lot of attention from a variety of stakeholders, and you heard a little bit about that from some of the speakers this morning, as well as others who are interested in flexible use rights being added to the 12 gigahertz band. So let me start by turning to the panel. And Michael, in particular, if you could provide some further background on the 12 gigahertz proceeding itself, including what is the current status? Where are we in that proceeding?
Sure. Well, thank you, Michele. And thank you, INCOMPAS, for putting this together. It's great to be in person and talking with colleagues. And so real quickly, I do want to back up and talk a little bit about DBS, just because that's so core to our DISH business model. In the 80s, the FCC put together rules that allowed for DBS service, and that allowed for DISH to come in and provide a new competitive television service that competed with cable. And so that is core to our business model, and really most of our revenue still comes from that business model today. And so when we looked at the 12 gigahertz band, and as you mentioned, it was auctioned in 2004, 2005, and DISH became a major holder of those terrestrial licenses. At the time, the commission made very onerous rules that were intended to protect that DBS service. And so, we bought some of the terrestrial licenses at auction, and, business options were limited given those rules, but our satellite service was protected. And fast forward to the MVDDS coalition that you mentioned in 2016, we said, look, this spectrum has a lot of great characteristics. We think there might be better business uses for it. And we believe that our DBS service can coexist with greater, higher power use, two-way use in the 12 gigahertz band. So DISH, along with Go Long Wireless and other licensees, petitioned the commission to explore that. They kind of waited on it a little bit. And then in 2020, more folks started looking at this beyond just the licensees. So INCOMPAS took a look at this, CIA, CCA, public interest groups like Public Knowledge, OTI took an interest in this. And so we really came to the commission with, I think, a good understanding of what this could be. And as you mentioned, Chairman Pai opened up the NPRM. And today, and mentioned after that, 5G for 12 gigahertz coalition launched, with which Chip Pickering is our co-lead. And we've put in a lot of comments that show that both, like we knew in 2016, DBS and terrestrial licenses can coexist in this band. And new studies. The only nationwide national study that was done by RKF Engineering showed that NGSO services could also coexist with higher power 5G and the 12 gigahertz band. So right now we're at a point where we think that we've done all the work, we've done all the studies, we've provided the commission with the facts of how this could look. And really we're just waiting and think the time is right for the commission to move forward and allow us to open up the band for greater 5G use.
Thank you, Michael. Let me turn to all the panelists to ask a broader question. There is a broad coalition of folks and a wide range of interest in this band. What are some of the use cases or attributes of the band that make it so appealing? Let's start with Carrie or Tim.
Tim, do you want to lay out the
technical
side?
Let me just say that my wife said for me to keep this like low tech. So I'm going to just go ahead and use analogies. The current rules that we're under right now that were made are pretty much like, we'll let you have a flashlight, but then we'll put a blanket over the front of it so you can just shine it all day long. And so we're trying to figure out how to use the band today. And quite frankly, it's been a really uphill battle because what we don't want to do is just sit on something. So how can we use it? Well, there's a fixed wireless solution, which means that you can broadcast from a tower to a house or a business. And with this spectrum that is so huge in megahertz, capacity, it's pretty much like putting a fiber optic cable right through the air. I mean, just boom, right there. So Chris Shipley, boom, right there. So if we had something that we could use that, a piece of technology, could we do it today? Well, sort of. I mean, we can take a Qualcomm chip and marry it with some really good technology that some really smart people from DARPA put together, which is going to come out real soon here. And under the existing rules, I can go ahead and I can broadcast that huge fiber optic pipe right through the air to a business or to a house or whatever, and provide a lot of capacity. But unfortunately, without any updated rules, I've got to use a common carrier band coming back. So I can do a fire hose going down, but I got to use a garden hose coming back. So right now, this band is not suitable at all for any type of competition. So when they said, can we use the existing rules? Should we change them? Yeah, we should.
And I would just say, add from a rural wireless perspective, what we're excited about at RWA for the use of this band is getting into things like precision agriculture. And we have a lot of need to push edge computing out to the farms to do the exchange of data, and we need more capacity for that exchange of data. So when we start talking about connecting tractors and irrigation systems, sensors for animals to know when and where things need to be done, when things need to be fed, when we need to fertilize, when we need to add water, all of those things is the farming of the future. And it's one thing to fund fiber broadband to a home on a farm. It's another thing to carry it across the farm. So this kind of wireless technology, what's kind of cool about this band is you've got the kind of the backhaul, the back and forth that you can do, but you can also lay it across the farm and do 5G out for precision ag. And you think about the oil industry and the gas industry and all of the other natural resources that we have out in rural America. How do we get those things taken care of using 5G and then bring that back to urban America? So that's what we're excited about. We have to, I think the Precision Ag Task Force at the FCC said, the report says we have to double our food supply in the year 2060, and we need to start now. We can't wait until 2050 to start that doubling of the food supply chain. So this will give us the technology that we need, that the farmers will have in hand and the ranchers will have in hand to be able to do that. And it's the farming of the future. So that's why we need the 12 gigahertz band, and that's why we joined the coalition.
Thank you. Joel and Michael.
Oh, sure. Wow, that's wow. I think my fellow panelists have basically spoken to this, but you're seeing the rubber hit the road with a lot of these different technologies and applications that you have with various spectrum. And I think what you see in this proceeding is something very interesting. And what you see is an actual incumbent coming to the table. In this case, it's Dish and a few others looking at this band and saying, okay, we recognize that it was used for X, but what about Y? And the commission, I think, was very receptive to that, mainly because they took a quote unquote all the above approach to figuring out how to resolve these issues of latency and also just the sheer amount of data that is required from things like precision agriculture and others. So this is a very interesting use case in which you see the commission looking and hearing not just industry concerns, but taking that industry concern and turning it into a policy objective, which I think is reflected in the NPRM, which for notice of proposal rulemaking, if we're being mindful of the acronyms. But ultimately, I really hope that this gets resolved soon, because we really can't wait for the avenue 5G to really really get unleashed. So yeah, I think this is like 12 gig, good.
Michael?
Yeah, so for Dish, as we're building out our network, we're building out an Open RAN virtualized 5G network today. We're going to have 20% of the population covered by this summer. And so we have spectrum that we're deploying for that, but this spectrum would serve really three purposes that we've already talked about. We could use it for mobile, we could put it into handsets, so we could deploy it in our network. And then we could have a fixed wireless service for the places that we have coverage, and then also backhaul with micro towers and smaller cell towers where fiber may not be ubiquitous. This would be a great spectrum band to connect those points to our network.
Terrific. The 5G for 12 gigahertz coalition also released a case study recently with Purdue University demonstrating how 12 gigahertz could improve connectivity for universities and rural communities. And GeoLinks also released a similar study finding that the 12 gigahertz band could be very helpful to connect underserved California school districts. Tim, could you talk more about the findings of those two studies?
Well, really smart people, which don't include me, would like to use this band and are starting to study this band because they feel like it would be a really good fixed wireless and also a mobile access type of band. So Purdue University, which is an engineering university, has a campus that is specializing now in trying to figure out what 5G is. Now, when we say 5G, people kind of like associate it with different things. When 4G came up, we didn't really know that you could have Uber. I mean, think about it. What is Uber? Uber means that everybody who uses the service and who drives the service has to have one of these. A supercomputer that can track where you are, that can do your bank transaction, that can go ahead and have the ability while you're in the car to talk and to text at the same time. And it really is a feat that nobody really thought you could do as a business model. So when people talk about 5G, they just assume it's going to be the same old stuff. Well, it's not. We're going to have things that we can't even comprehend because we couldn't even comprehend Uber. So 5G really is something that we're talking about that we don't really know. We're laying the infrastructure for things we don't even know we're going to have in the future. So Purdue University and other universities are trying to take a look at that and go, okay, what's the next step? What is the next thing? And what they know is that the next thing is going to require a large amount of capacity, a large amount of data, okay? So that we can have more ability to do things like surgery online, okay? So that means when the surgeon zooms in on his iPad, he can go down to the cellular level, not just to the skin level, okay? You're gonna have to have these types of think tanks that are gonna have to use this type of spectrum and work on it. So what are we doing? We have some licenses that are in these universities, this Purdue University. They came to us and said, could we go ahead and start studying this band? They said, absolutely. They said, do you have some equipment? There's going to be some equipment that's going to be in a fixed wireless setting coming this summer. So they're going to use that. And we're pretty much excited about the fact that they'll use the real life application instead of a study of what they could do. We can start using that band today. We hope that the FCC will grant us some temporary authority to do a lot more than we can under the existing rules. And we also hope that the rules will change because of the fact that then that'll unleash 500 megahertz of space with really an open channel plan and a lot of really good flexible use rights to have that new thing, that new Uber.
Carrie, anything to add?
I was just going to add, going back to what you said earlier on the capacity, now we can only do however down and not up, and we need more two-way of that. And we're struggling right now, I know, for wireless backhaul in rural America today with the capacity constraints. And we're having to try to double down on the existing microwave spectrum and load more in and get waivers out of the FCC. So I think that demonstrates, it should at least demonstrate to the FCC of why this is necessary today. And then we start talking about the future. And I know the farmers in the areas that our members serve are already talking about how they can sit on the beach in Florida and run their farms on iPads. So I know that's one of the applications they're looking forward to instead of being there in the dead of winter in North Dakota and Montana. So
It's great.
so just you can let your imagination run wild.
So clearly there are many technical benefits and some strong use cases for the spectrum. What about on the policy side, other characteristics of this band that make it very suitable for this proceeding and it gives rise to other possibilities? Joel and Michael?
Yeah, so I think the one thing that you notice in this band is that there's a lot of it. Like there's 500 megahertz, which is incredibly important to understand that that you can potentially do solve a lot of issues in regards to wireless connectivity. So if someone you can both at one end promote 5G within underserved and unserved areas, while at the same time provide more capabilities that you heard some of the panelists talk about, which is precision medicine or remote surgery, and those kind of issues are very, very, very important if you think about the proximity in rural areas from a local population to their nearest hospital, which could be hundreds of miles away. So the interesting other thing about this band is just the amount of spectrum that's available, and that means obviously the amount of opportunities that exist and enough space where interference concerns become less and less of an issue, mainly because the use cases are so separately situated. So I'm very optimistic that of 12 gigahertz and where it sits now, because I think that we have enough engineering in the record to demonstrate that there is this multi-use approach that seems to be the most appropriate use of this band because it increases the amount of competition within the band, while at the same time increases the amount of different types of services that can also be used folks can leverage to provide these services like precision ag or remote surgeries.
Yeah, I'll just add on to the capacity, 500 megahertz. You say 500 megahertz, 500 megahertz, that's great. It's doubling our mid-band spectrum in the US, doubling it. So when we think about how are we going to win the race to 5G, how are we going to compete with China and with other competitors around the world, we need more spectrum. And this is a ready-made solution to literally double our mid-band spectrum allocation. Secondly, I'll just add, there are no federal encumbrances here. I know we've heard Chip talk about it before, but we don't have to worry about another federal agency that you've never heard of saying, oh, I decided I've become a spectrum expert and I want to have a say in what's going on here. None of that here as well. And back to the characteristics of the band, RS Access put together a report, the Robertson report. I encourage everyone to take a look at it, where they evaluated, you think about mid-band, a lot of mid-bands, 2 to 6 gigahertz. And then you have millimeter wave up at 24 gigahertz and above. 12 sits right there in the sweet spot between the two, where the propagation characteristics of 12 are much more so closely aligned with 3-4 gigahertz. And the throughput, the data that you can get through is much more closely aligned with the millimeter wave. So you really are sitting here on this spectrum asset that can propagate well, has great throughput, and can really just supercharge our 5G efforts here in America.
And I'd like to harp on one thing that Michael said that was incredibly important. And I don't want it to be missed, is that this is a great opportunity because of the lack of federal incumbents that aren't in this band. So we've all read the news every time that industry comes anywhere near a federally occupied space. We get all of these parade of horribles that get thrown out, and proceedings get delayed and further delayed. This, as I mentioned earlier, this is a place where incumbents are coming to the table. This is, in my mind, this is a clear win for the FCC to just negotiate a deal, which I believe they are now in the process of doing, to further our mid-band capacities, because that is essentially the heart of 5G. That is the meat and potatoes in terms of how 5G gets from just these siloed cities into more of a national framework.
Joel, let's stay with you, and I'll ask you about some of the opposition arguments. Some of the fixed satellite incumbents have noted that expanding terrestrial rights in this band might cause some harmful interference to DBS and their fixed satellite services. Can you give us some background on that and what the arguments are against their arguments?
I'll be kind. I think that they are, on one end, worst case, they're misleading. Best case, they're misunderstood. And mainly because just the overall size and impact of the band and the overall uses of the band don't really, it's not the same as two operators are directly working next to each other and you can't be able to monitor the power levels. This is, what some of the folks who have more of a permission-based use of the band, I'm talking about folks like SpaceX and others, they essentially have overestimated their licenses to provide certain power levels that may or may not be within their delegated right vis-a-vis FCC grants. But even to take their argument at face value, the argument is essentially saying that if I'm an operator performing 5G in the middle of an urban area, that somehow affects my ability to provide services in like Bumpkin, West Virginia, which is 100 miles away, or even thousands of miles away in some cases, which doesn't make any sense. And even when you look at the engineering, it's not any more clear as to why that is the case. And so you had a lot of engineering that was put in the record that seemed to dispel some of those interference concerns. And I mean, all of us waited with bated breath to see what SpaceX was going to come back with, and it turned out to be a slideshow. And the slideshow was vague responses that ultimately led to the conclusion that we can't do it, which, and you know this better than most, and I think everyone on this panel knows that doesn't really fly with OET, with Opposite Engineering Technology. They actually want technical reports to demonstrate true interference. They want you to use traditional methodologies that demonstrate that there actually is harm here. And I think that the reason why you haven't seen that much of a pushback from our SpaceX friends is mainly because they can't demonstrate it using the methodologies that are appropriate to measure such interference. So but the background really is SpaceX is really trying to do, I think they are trying to do some good. They are trying to provide rural broadband, which is very helpful. They see this band as a huge opportunity, as does everyone. And they unfortunately have taken the route of using the dangerous term interference to make broad claims that are simply baseless.
Thank you. And Michael, they also say that DBS might be affected by potential harmful interference. Can you address that part of the argument?
Sure. And real quick, if I can just piggyback off of what Joel was talking about real quickly.
Don't you dare.
When NGSOs had their allocations for spectrum for their service, with regard to 12 gigahertz, they were given the ability to come in, but it was conditional. And it was conditioned based on the fact that the FCC may act in this area. Now, this isn't to say that we want to kick them out of the band. We want to share the band. We want them to be successful, but we also want terrestrial services to be successful. They are the ones that are, for lack of a better word, trying to kick everyone else out of the band. because they don't want to share the band with anyone. Now, with regard to DBS, look, this is our core business. If we thought that we could not coordinate our received dish signals for our satellite service, we wouldn't be here. It wouldn't work for our business model. Now, there are two services. There's Dish and there's DirecTV. It is eminently feasible for us to know exactly where those dishes are, for us to know, what sort of mitigation techniques are needed to make sure that those signals are protected, as well as 5G signals, whether it be mobile, fixed, or backhaul. So it's of no concern to us. And we've done studies all the way back to 2016 showing that that is the case.
Thank you. Another argument that the fixed satellite operators raise has to do with timing, and that now is not the time to change the allocation here or add fixed use rights, because they have not yet had the opportunity to achieve their potential. And also there's plenty of other alternative terrestrial broadband spectrum. How would you respond to those arguments, Tim or Carrie?
How would I respond to it?
You had your chance.
Do you want to respond
That was
first?
my chance.
Okay.
No, I meant, that's my response.
Oh,
I guess this whole controversy, whatever that controversy may be, has to do with sharing. And as we all learned in kindergarten, our human nature is that we want to have everything to ourselves, and then we're taught to share. And I think this really comes down to the fact that what started out as a band that was a DBS band, which meant that there was Dish and DirecTV, and we all drove through rural America and saw all those dishes everywhere, now has opened up to the fact that there's a lot of people that could use that same spectrum for what they want to use it for. And it's incumbent upon our baser natures to say, well, I just want it for me, and you guys can go pound sand. And so I think what we really need to look at is, how is it that we can share? And what RKF Engineering did, which was the same engineering firm that did the C-band study, which showed all of that technology could be shared and everything could be safe and planes aren't going to fall out of the sky, is that we can all get along. So our kindergarten teacher, who was very, very, very smart, went ahead and said, hey guys, you can all get along. You can do your DBS, you can do your mobile, you can do your fixed wireless, you can do your agriculture, you can track your cows from the beach in Sarasota. You can all do it. So now you got to get together in a room and figure out how you're going to work out all the rest of it. And I think when it comes right down to it, to make it really, really simple, the technology that we have today really is smart, and it can understand if it's trying to go ahead and get in somebody else's turf. We have radios now that can go ahead and intercept beams that know, and they can form around it. They can figure things out. And we have really smart people that are in this room today that can nod their head and say, yeah, that stuff's available today. So we're not going to really interfere. We're not going to go ahead and cut out the guy who's watching NFL football on his dish satellite. We're not going to cut out the Starlink that's in the backyard of somebody's house. We're going to be able to walk around, talk on the phone, go ahead and have that robo-surgery, the cows in the backyard, the whole thing, and it's all going to work well. We just need to upgrade the rules, and then there's business applications where smart people get in a room and figure it out.
thank you.
I would say, if not now, then when? Because who's not waiting to deploy national networks is China. They are not negotiating with anyone else in terms of global dominance of 5G or even 6G, which is really around is really closer than we think it is. So my general sense is that, look, I can't get as elemental as kindergarten, but I can certainly say that at the end of all of this, it really comes down to who's going to come to the table here. And it seems as if folks that have come to the table are already here, and it looks as if we can share. So if it comes down to having one operator versus several, I think we should go with the latter. And so if someone's saying only one operator can operate in this, I think you should be highly skeptical of that particular style of argument, because the engineering completely contradicts them on almost every fundamental level. So if not now, then when?
Thank you. So we now have, bring this up to a higher level, a new FCC chairwoman who spoke this morning, and hopefully soon a third FCC commissioner. How would you say that this proceeding may tie into their spectrum priorities and their framework? I know in the past, FCCs unleashing more spectrum for fixed, for mobile, for licensed and unlicensed, and satellite service has been a big priority. How would you scope this within that broader framework? Let's start with Michael.
Yeah, well, I mean, the spectrum auctions that are, lining up really aren't there right now. We've got maybe 2.5 this year, and then what? And so with 12, we have an opportunity. And so I hope it becomes a big opportunity and priority of the chairwoman to look at this. It's already been auctioned, so it doesn't have to be auctioned again. So we don't have to worry about that delay of time to the market. And really all it needs is new rules that can allow us all to share. And so I think it's an issue that she can take hold of as soon as she wants, as soon as OET gets the reports and gets the 8th floor comfortable with what they're reading from what RKF has put into the record. But this is something I won't say it's easy, because nothing's easy in DC, but as things go, this is this could be a layup for the commission.
Excellent. Others?
We thought C-band was easy too. But I would also add that this is clearly within the realm of possibility in terms of what the prior FCC did with FCC Chairman Pai, what you heard today from Commissioner Brendan Carr, and I think was seconded by Symington, which is, look, we'll let the engineering speak for itself. If the engineering comes back and saying we can share this band, they clearly look at it as if they are in favor of it. And I think that and we just heard the chairman or chairperson speak on competition and the value of competition. And so if you find a way, an opportunity to increase competition using a particular band, I think you should leverage it. So I think this fits in not just with all the spectrum priorities, but also the higher level priorities of encouraging competition in the wireless space.
I would just add that in addition to that, I think with the Infrastructure Act and what NTI is going to have to do, what the states are going to do, we're going to need some support, at least in rural America, because that's where a lot of this stuff is going to be deployed. Like I said, you can get fiber out there, but you've got to get wireless across the areas to get the coverage that we need. And I think this is a great piece of spectrum to do that. It doesn't mean that folks in rural America have to go into an auction and they don't have to, bid on these big Ps that we don't like, or we don't like Ps in rural America, because rural carriers don't end up with spectrum. And if rural carriers don't end up with it, it doesn't get deployed. So there's a lot of things going on at the commission, especially the chairwoman put together the enhanced competition incentive program to start using spectrum in the secondary market. So I think this is right up her alley. I think it'll be great when we get a fifth commissioner, and I think this can all be done in a very bipartisan way that's a win-win for the country.
As we've seen in the past, an FCC decision is not necessarily the end of the story, because some of these decisions are then challenged. And how would you rate, let's ask Joel, the FCC's chance of success? How has the FCC's track record been in recent decisions? And how would you estimate the FCC might do with this decision, assuming that they were to weigh in favor, might fare in court?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I don't think there's enough coffee in the world to keep people up for a history of admin law in the FCC, but I would say that they have an incredible amount of deference or the courts give a incredible amount of deference, particularly on spectrum decisions to the FCC, and in particular because of the way the statutes are crafted. So the way in which you can evaluate whether an order is going to pass muster is determined under a very specific admin law case that we'll call Chevron. And Chevron has a two-step test. It basically says, did Congress directly speak to it, or did it leave it ambiguous? And if the answer to the question is one or the other, well, if the question is yes, it directly spoke to it, game over. If it says that it's ambiguous, okay, well then the next question, or quote unquote step, would be, did is what the FCC did reasonable or was it arbitrary and capricious? If it was reasonable, it stays. Arbitrary and capricious, it's out. So you match that with also another case called Brand X, which actually dealt with the FCC, which is basically Chevron on steroids, which says that it doesn't matter what a court thinks is the right call. What matters is what the FCC did is first, if the statute is within their jurisdiction, and they interpret it in a reasonable way based off of the record, we're not going to stand in their way. So I would say they have a very high probability, and you saw that with 6 gigahertz, where the DC Circuit unequivocally granted the FCC full authority to move forward with 6 gigahertz. You saw that in the C-band proceeding. So I would imagine that whatever decision they come up with, given how extensive this record is, as long as like they cite to specific portions of engineering reports and give a logical reasoning, which I'm sure they will, because the folks at OGC are very, very smart and they're very calculated. So I would imagine that it too would pass the deference test under Chevron.
Thank you, Joel. We have just a few more minutes left for this panel. So let me close by asking each of the panelists about what's next in this rulemaking proceeding of the band, starting with Michael with respect to specifically how would the FCC in fact grant flexible use rights to the incumbents, to the MVDS licensees in particular, given that they are already covering much of the country?
Sure. Well, right now the record's made, the engineering analysis in, the facts are in. So as soon as the commission were to decide, we believe they can come out with new rules for higher power two-way service within the band. One issue that unfortunately we haven't had a chance to talk too much about yet is opportunistic sharing. And this is another aspect that might have a different look from the FCC. They may come back with a further notice for proposed rulemaking. And just so folks understand this, we're talking so far about sharing amongst DBS and GSO and terrestrial rights, but within the Association 5G for 12 gigahertz coalition, we want to share within the terrestrial rights, right? We have licensees that have purchased these licenses at auction, but if they're not going to build out, we want to be able to allow opportunistic sharing for fixed wireless folks that didn't purchase this at auction, or consider new rules for indoor opportunistic use, so long as it's on a non-interference basis. So the sharing really goes all around, and so I think that might be the next step for the commission to look at that.
Yeah. Carrie and Tim, next steps?
Get it out there so we can use it. I'm way ahead of you.
All right, Tim.
Well, we've had these licenses since 2004. We just can't wait to go ahead and allow people to deploy it and use it.
All right. Joel, we gave you a bit of a break. Any thoughts about FCC next steps from you, what you'd like to see?
What I would like to see is them to move forward, obviously. And I think that it's time for OET to come out with its report. I think they have enough in the record. And granted, I will press Tom Struble a little harder just to get them together quicker, because I think he's working on this. But the good folks, I think I would say that I really want to see a strong engineering report out of this. I think that's only going to be helpful in terms of, as we talked about earlier, court cases and everything else. I think it also makes the case, because I don't think SpaceX is going to take this lying down. So the better the engineering report, I think the better the chance that all the things are quelled. So the first thing I would like to see is a great engineering report, and then I would like to see a vote.
All right. Well, with that, we'll close out the panel. Thank you so much for participating, to the panelists, and thanks to the audience.